Hello, you're listening to Abstract AF. I'm Sneha Jaswal, and I'm going to be talking about the horror thriller novel The Ruins by Scott Smith. Now, this book follows a group of young friends holidaying on the beaches of Cancun. However, their vacation takes a dark turn when they get trapped in a Mexican jungle after stepping into a forbidden enclosure. The local Mayans surround them with guns, ensuring they cannot leave the site. Now, I found out about The Ruins only recently while reading a horror comic called Evil Cast and decided to order it online immediately because Stephen King had some great things to say about the novel. Better than any suspense novel since The Silence of the Lambs, reads the cover of the edition quoting King's praise for the work. All the primary protagonists of The Ruins are young people, 4 of whom are Americans, looking to have some fun before they start college. There's Jeff and Amy, both medical students who are dating each other. Then there's Amy's best friend Stacy and her boyfriend Eric, who plans to become a teacher. These 4 befriend a young German tourist called Matthias during the trip and decide to go with him to the site of a remote Mayan ruin to look for Matthias's brother, who left with a girl to go there and hasn't come back since. A young cheery Greek called Pablo, who doesn't even speak English and is constantly joking around, often hangs out with them and also joins them on their quest. So basically, The Ruins is about a holiday gone deadly wrong for 6 youngsters who set out in the morning for a Mexican jungle, hoping to have a fun day hiking, maybe reuniting their friend with his brother and returning to the beaches by night. In fact, the novel for me felt like an elaborate survival story version of H.G. Wells' short story, The Flowering of the Strange Orchid, which was about carnivorous plants. Scott Smith takes that concept to another level at this remote Mexican jungle with these young kids and makes a pretty terrifying story out of it. Smith spins a tense tale with easy-to-read language and an omniscient narrator who takes us through the journey of these youngsters who try to survive under the harsh Mexican sun with little food and water, hoping that a search party would eventually save them from the jungle and the hostile Mayans who won't let them leave. The character Jeff is sort of the lead protagonist of the story, who keeps coming up with plans and ideas to find a way to survive as long as possible and maybe find their way out of the horrifying situation they've gotten themselves into. But despite his leadership qualities, Jeff seems to suffer from the savior complex, and his actions are often driven by the need to keep himself occupied and sane, and not necessarily for the benefit of his friends. Matthias is actually the only likable character in the 6-people group, and it's mostly because he's the quiet one. He keeps to himself, is practical in his outlook, and supports Jeff in most of his decisions. The girls, Amy and Stacy, often seem to be like 2 mildly different versions of the same person. The only major difference between these 2 girls, if you don't count their physical appearance, is the fact that Amy often complains about things. The only reason Stacy isn't as whiny as her best friend is because she spaces out easily and as a result doesn't care too much about what is happening around her. So Stacy essentially is like a laid-back version of Amy on drugs. For a book titled The Ruins, the author cleverly manages to not give readers any historical background about the place at all, unless you count a few conversations between the friends who have only theories about what is happening to them. And for readers who like the freedom to imagine and draw their own conclusions, this aspect could be a plus point. But for those who expect a cohesive explanation, things can get rather disappointing. Many of the scares in The Ruins hinges on body horror, so there are plenty of graphic and gory descriptions of mangled body parts. But the psychological manifestations of the experience is much milder than you would expect. And while the novel wasn't exactly unputdownable for me, it did keep me invested until the end, and I took my own time reading it, although the book surprisingly isn't divided into chapters. Towards the end, the evil foliage gets ridiculously malevolent in ways that was unintentionally hilarious instead of being creepy or scary. I mean, sure, reading supernatural horror fiction demands that readers suspend logic and reasoning for some parts, but even after doing that, some things just seem too far-fetched. For example, the way the foliage is eventually portrayed, it feels like they could be a character from Mean Girls. Well, that's as far as I would go to spoil the novel for you. Overall, it's a pretty gripping book for horror thriller fans, especially if you haven't already read too many stories in the same genre, because The Ruins came out in 2006 and can seem a little outdated in its character development and depictions. I'm not sure how to rate it, but I would say 3.5 on 5. And that's all from me. Talk to you the next time.